So last year, we were inundated by articles speaking on the crisis of men and boys. We were talking about the loneliness epidemic. We're talking about them falling out of the workforce. We're talking about all kinds of things that had to do with men. Now, we did not see the counterpart, women and girls getting articles every 2 to 3 months. It was all that I saw. And I stay scouring the news, the crisis of masculinity. Now, we're starting out 2024 the same way because obviously or apparently they're still failing and flailing. So let's talk about it. And I do want to point out, just keep this in mind, that there are quite a few women that are in this post that are, writing this post, commenting for this post. And I really think that this needs to be a male-led initiative to stem the crisis of masculinity. But for this article, it's from Salon. It says, yes, men and boys are in crisis, but traditional masculinity won't help them. We can't cure toxic masculinity until we demonstrate what healthy masculinity looks like, as written by a woman, Mary Elizabeth William. Okay, she says, I'm tired of toxic masculinity. I'm tired of its existence in general, particularly in the corrosive radicalization of our boys and young men. But I'm also tired of how the phrase has become synonymous with masculinity in general. I'm tired of the ways in which the suffering of males, especially the ones who aren't white or straight or from a privileged socioeconomic background, is dismissed, marginalized, and misunderstood. And while I agree with my colleague Amanda Marcotte, another woman, that healthy men draw their self-esteem from inside by cultivating their own talents and good qualities, I also think that our culture is doing a terrible job of defining and encouraging that healthy masculinity. We have so much work to be done, says another woman, Jennifer L.W. Fink, author of Building Boys, Raising Great Guys in a World That Misunderstands Males, and a mother of 4 sons. Gender affects boys' lives too, how they're treated and how they're limited, and they need and deserve our help and support. The statistics are dismaying. Boys are 7% more likely to drop out of high school than girls, a gender gap that Fortune last year noted has largely gone unaddressed by schools. They have higher unemployment rates and have shorter life expectancies, and are 4 times more likely than females to die by self-deletion. They are significantly less likely than females to seek mental health treatment or assistance for intimate partner violence. Just as it doesn't help any of us anywhere on the gender spectrum to take the advancements of girls and women as a threat to boys and men, it's likewise lazy and simplistic to use the damage wrought by the patriarchy to let ourselves off the hook for what's going on with our guys. So, how do we reframe the conversation from a zero-sum game to one in which we can all thrive? We have to start with non-judgmental curiosity and attention. In my office, in private practice, and in college and on college campuses, I've seen a sort of reverse anatomy is destiny, where men feel judged, blamed, and devalued merely because of their biological status, says Michael Alsey, PhD, a clinical psychologist in Tarrytown, New York. Worse yet, they feel unwelcome to talk about these issues because of their historic privilege in society. Some of them have even sheepishly said to me, are we really allowed to talk about our own challenges? Shouldn't we be focusing on those who have really been marginalized? And those feelings of shame and stigma can be deeply isolating and dangerous. Jennifer Fink, another woman, observes that often boys feel alienated in a lot of spaces. Boys feel accused before they've done anything. They feel like they don't really have safe places to talk about what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they need. In the internet connected age, when it's very easy to go on your phone in privacy, it becomes very easy to go down the rabbit hole. Fink says we can remedy some of this through an intersection of culture, parenting, and education that listens to our boys. We have to let them know through both our actions and our words that we're interested in what you think. We need to give them room to talk through some of what they're experiencing and what they're seeing so that they can make sense of it. If we just shut down conversations, essentially we're sending them to the dark corners of the internet. We also need to encourage them emotionally. Boys are socialized in school, if not also in the home, to disconnect from their ability to be connected with themselves or others, says Dr. Daniel Boscajon, Director of Research and co-founder of the Institute for Trauma-Informed Relationships. This often results in a form of emotional illiteracy that recognizes one emotion, anger. Our civic and religious institutions spread false information about what it means to be a man, and each generation of boys has grown up with fewer and fewer examples of men who embody a character forged through becoming responsible for their own emotional regulation. But Bosco John says there's an alternative. Positive masculinity is achieved with a sense of gentleness and grace. There's a sense of invitation rather than imposition. There are social skills that accomplish a robust sense of interdependence and connection, skills that acknowledge that we are all in it together and that nobody can succeed unless everyone does. He adds, the best way to encourage a better, healthier masculinity is through education. The more institutions invest in demonstrating the advantages of a balanced and wise masculinity, the more culture will be able to begin to change. Andreas Portela, board chair of Voice to Men Tucson, concurs. It's imperative for society to champion healthy masculinity, he says, noting that his organization takes a proactive approach, focusing on the specific needs of masculine identified youth in Pima County, collaborating with local experts in DV, job placement, and second chance programming. Our collective responsibility lies in creating environments where men and masculine individuals feel safe discussing their emotions, embracing aspects perceived as feminine, and actively disrupting toxic patriarchy. Honestly, it's how we support it. And Clara Law, a teacher, relational psychotherapist, and senior contributor at Holly Dog blog, offers a similar and similarly hopeful perspectives as an educator. Some approaches I found promising through my research and counseling work include more promoting positive role models who integrate traditionally masculine and feminine qualities such as courage, strength, and vulnerability. Mentorship programs pairing boys with male mentors can provide guidance. Reframing help seeking as a sign of character, not weakness, is important. It's not just young boys who need help and encouragement. While much of the discourse on toxic masculinity is timely and needed, it can be weaponized in unhealthy ways to silence men's opinions and viewpoints, notes Ashira DeRosa, a licensed marriage and family therapist in Buffalo. I see some emotionally healthy men who are nervous to take leadership within their families for fear of being toxically masculine. There has to be a space where a man ruling with an iron fist and having all of his agency stripped from him. While within leftist circles, there is an understanding that we cannot talk about groups as a monolith, men are frequently not offered this same grace. Interpersonally, approaching people with genuine curiosity and compassion helps create far more safety than a quick clapback. Okay, part of the screenshot that is cut off says masculinity isn't going to detox itself. It takes thoughtful work that is as integral to dismantling the patriarchy as anything else we've got going on. We can get there. Finally, boys and men's issues are a topic of national discussion. Yes, it is. And some action is happening, notes Jennifer Fink, like the recent founding of American Institute for Boys and Men. In Washington state, a bipartisan group of lawmakers of diverse genders and races is close to establishing a commission on boys and men to complement the state's Women's Commission. And though it sounds simple, Fink reminds us, I really think we need to look at boys as humans first, as humans who deserve care and nurturing and protection. And because we've all been socialized in this environment, this takes some deliberate action. It's going to take a whole lot of deprogramming, but I don't think that men and boys are going to be able to detox from this toxic masculinity until these roles where women are supposed to be subservient and men are entitled and supposed leaders of the community simply by being born men. Until those ideas change, then none of this is going to work because women and girls are emerging in our own assertiveness, and it's always going to be a zero-sum game until these things get worked out. Now I want to pivot to this YouTube video. And if you are on YouTube, I will make sure to link the entire clip. This is why are 7 million men choosing to not work? So these two men are discussing men that have dropped out of the workforce. And this man, Nicholas Eberstadt, he is a political economist and demographer. He's talking about the 7 million men in prime working age, that's like 25 to 54, who are not actually working, and what he is seeing and who is taking care of them and the phenomenon that's going on with the economy. So watch these two clips that I have provided, and I will go ahead and link the whole video so you guys can watch it for yourself. It's a long one, so I did pull out two clips for everybody. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to like, comment, and share. I will not be coming in on the back end.
Up front, a rather dramatic 7 million person cohort of men in the US, a large chunk of whom are not looking for work. What is the story of modern male unemployment? How do we get to the stage where this is a hidden catastrophe?
Well, like so many things in history, it happens gradually. It doesn't come upon us all at once like a meteor strike. After the end of the Second World War, for about 20 years, the work rates and the labor force participation rates of this group of guys we're discussing, the 25 to 54s, it's pretty close to 100%. Not 100%, but pretty close. And it wasn't going anywhere. It was bouncing around a little bit. Then starting in the mid-1960s, things started to change. And from, let's say, about 1965, it's a good year to mark it by. It may not be perfect, but it's pretty close. From 1965 to our conversation today, it's been basically a straight line out of the workforce of men, a flight from work, leaving work, not in labor force, whatever you'd like to call it. And it's eerie if you track this on a graph or a piece of paper. I did a first edition of a book on men without work in 2016, and I used this graph as the cover, which is, I mean, it's almost a straight line. I mean, it's not quite geoastronomy. It's not quite that perfect, but it's pretty close for the social sciences. And what was really shocking to me was when I came back to do an update after the pandemic last year. It's almost exactly the same line. I could have taken the cover of that book and just, found a ruler and kept the thing going. I have no explanation for that. I mean, this is something that happens in the physical sciences. This is not something that happens in the social sciences. So, I mean, it will change eventually, but I was just stunned by that.
I heard that since around about 1950, men have retreated from the labor force at around about 0.1% per month solidly. Is that about right?
I'd have to do the numbers on paper, but it has been absolutely relentless. And I would have started it in the mid 60s. For the 1950s, it's more or less a kind of a slightly bouncing line with no trend that I could divine.
Okay, economies, demographics, unemployment, we go through peaks and troughs, we go through cycles, boom and bust. Right. How have you managed to find, explain to me the underlying dynamic that has managed to create a ruler shape?
All right. Well, we can start by the explanations that don't work, right? And because those are always so popular, and I think they're called received wisdom, right? So the received wisdom in this area is that this is a phenomenon driven by economic and structural technological change, that we've had this extraordinary revolution since the end of the Second World War, which is true. And we've had this tremendous set of technological changes, and that's true. And we've had this big shift in demand, less demand for less skilled labor, true. Outsourcing, true. China enters the World Trade Organization, true. Okay, but that's not the whole story, and it's not even most of the story, I don't think. If it were most of the story, you couldn't get a straight line like the one I'm describing to you, because we have a business cycle, right? I mean, we've got boom and bust periods, and you'd go up and down. You'd see a big kapow when China enters the World Trade Organization. You'd see a big disruption. Doesn't show up. When we have our beautiful little monsters that disrupt all our technology, you'd see something. So that's not happening. What else isn't happening? Well, if you take a look at men with less skills, they are not all, commonly disadvantaged in the labor force. If you take a look at foreign-born guys who are high school dropouts, but they're married, their work rates and labor force participation rates are indistinguishable, as I mentioned, from college guys who are domestic. On the other hand, if you take a look at a native-born guy who's never been married, it's a disaster. It's like 50% or less chance of being even in the workforce. So in this group that's supposedly homogenous, there are like 40 percentage points of difference in participation. So that part doesn't work so well either. The really biggest, I think, challenge to this idea is the extraordinary peacetime labor shortage that we're having now, which at time of our conversation, 10 or a million unfilled jobs in the United States. So you can't say that this men without work thing is because there isn't any work for the men. I mean, and millions of those jobs are not for like hedge fund managers or chemical engineers. There are a lot of jobs where the main qualification is showing up on time every day, not stoned. And even so, employers have not been able to fill these millions and millions of extra jobs.
Is that employers can't get somebody to come and do the job without getting them fired, or is that people simply aren't applying for the jobs?
There are a lot of jobs that people aren't applying for. I mean, we have seen a spike of about 4 million in the total number of unfilled jobs since the eve of the pandemic. We have also seen a slump of about 4 million total in the size of the workforce by comparison to what we would have expected from the pre-COVID trends. Not all of these are guys, I hasten to say. We're seeing now a sort of a new face to the flight from work in America. But the problem with the men fleeing the workforce was the original origin of all of this.
How many women are added into this cohort?
If you count women who are over the age of 55, a considerable number. There are some under 55 as well. There is a problem that is, one might say, no bigger than a man's fist on the horizon heading towards us, which is the kind of the doppelganger, the women without work. I'll tell you that in a moment. But if we look at the 55 plus group, they account for more than half of the shortfall that I just mentioned to you. And this is a very new phenomenon because from the 50s until about the 90s, American men and women were kind of starting to enjoy the notion of retiring early. But from the mid-90s up to the eve of COVID, these older workers were basically the only bright spot in the American labor tableau. Their work rates were going steadily up. Their labor force participation rates were going steadily up. But since then, there's been a shock and a drop. And despite the rollout of COVID, of vaccines, and everything else, they haven't come back to the workforce.
Getting back to this big cohort of invisible men,
Yeah.
how are they surviving and paying for life?
Well, as best I could figure out as a research nerd, kind of looking at statistics and on my computer in the basement, it looked to me as if there's a couple of different factors: girlfriends and family, as long as you count Uncle Sam as part of the family. There are quite a large number of these guys who are living with people. I mean, either cohabiting or at home with parents or others. And that's helping to pay the bills. What's also helping to pay the bills is, as I said, the U.S. government, in particular, our disability programs for people who are unable to work. Those programs seem to have morphed away from their original humane intention and now seem to provide an alternative income source to regular employment for several millions, for millions and millions of these guys.